Thanks for taking some time out of your day and joining us for Moonnox's first ever webinar. Everything that sucks about professional services has one solution: collective compounding intelligence. I'm David Cotten, the co-founder and CTO of Moonnox, and thanks for spending some time with me. I am joined here today by my colleague, Melody Bentler, who I actually, once upon a time, used to work together with Melody. Melody and I are both career consultants. I've spent a lot of time on the technical side of complex software implementation, and Melody, who joined us on Monday as our Chief Services Officer, really focuses on the human side of things and helping bring change and transformation into organizations that are leading complex technology implementations. So you'll see her in the chat. She's going to be asking some questions to the attendees, and we really want to keep this interactive. So please, leave your questions. We'll have a dedicated Q&A at the end, but also we're going to be asking some questions as well. We really want to hear people's background, their perspective, and get some feedback as we go through the session. So I think it would help, and Melody, if you want to just drop it in the chat, if everyone can just kind of leave, what kind of firm you work for. Is it a strategy firm, system integrator, advisory? It would help us tune the message a little bit as we go through. Cool. All right, so I bet this slide probably looks a little bit familiar to everybody here. You probably have a bunch of different tools where work is happening. You have a bunch of different data stores inside of the organization where everybody's performing work. You probably have some type of call recording software over here, and you've got maybe an AI chatbot like ChatGPT over here, and you've got Slack doing what Slack does, and you've got email, and you've got Google Drive or SharePoint, and you have all of these different data silos, and none of them talk to each other. And I think a lot of firms for the past 20 years have been preaching about breaking down data silos. But here's the reality. Like, everyone's talking and nothing's connected. And for the first time ever, we're in a world where unstructured data, like emails, like Slack messages, like phone calls and meetings, can actually be used to drive real tangible value, where it's not just columns and rows in some database somewhere, but it's actually the natural path of work, how people actually interact day to day. And usually there's a ton of chaos around that, right? How do I actually pull this together? So just something that would be great would be, just drop one word in the chat that describes how this chaos feels in your day-to-day. Is it confusing, frustrating? I'd love to see just like what people think. Bedlam, organized chaos. The organized is even a annoying, stressful. So yeah, like it's really hard. And I think as consultants, it's even harder because we're being hired to be the expert, and there's an expectation when you're the expert around how you're supposed to carry yourself and how you're supposed to be able to cut through that chaos. And the open secret that probably everybody in this webinar knows is, like, a lot of times we're figuring out things the same time that the customer is. And it's our job to really hide and mask that chaos so that they don't feel it and we deliver an exceptional customer client experience. So the reality is, when you look at intelligence inside of a professional services firm, there's 3 levels. And what most people on here today are familiar with is the concept of individual intelligence. This is, I'm sure everybody here has had this happen, like, hey, where have we done X? And somebody answers, oh, this person here did that project 2 years ago, and I think they remember. You should go talk to them. So then you spend 3 days trying to find time on that person's calendar. You finally get it, and then they say something to the effect of, oh yeah, I did that project. I don't really remember. And it didn't actually go that well, but I don't really remember why. And oh, by the way, I have another meeting starting right now. So let's find another time to connect. That's where most firms are today, point to point, and person to person. And the reality is we see that behavior all the way from 10-person firms, one-person individual contractors, all the way up to like the biggest of the big. And um, that's a really challenging spot to be as a firm because you're directly tied to the individual people that are delivering that project. And it's really stressful for those individual people too, because there's a ton of chaos in trying to route to find the right person when you need help. Recently, there's been a lot of talk about collective intelligence, and this is where I think a lot of the conversation is heading with AI. So what's collective intelligence, right? Maybe you have shared Google Drives. Maybe you have a training program inside the organization where you're systemically, telling people how they should operate and how they should work together. Maybe you have a CRM where nobody ever updates it, and you've got, 5 different versions of the same pitch decks that, nobody is sure which the right one is. So even still, a lot of that collective intelligence is really just knowing the one person to talk to who solved the problem before, and then also having them point you to the share drive that exists for that project that happened 2 years ago, but they're going to give you a dump of all of these documents. What we're talking about here today is this concept of compounding intelligence. And we really think that for professional services, this is the end game. And when we say compounding intelligence, what we really mean by that is through the natural course of work, people working day to day, all of the client interactions, all of our internal ceremonies, all of the collective knowledge of the organization is feeding an internal hive mind where all of the prior collective experiences of the firm are building upon each other. So you can understand not only what we've worked on in the past or what the pitch deck looked like, but you can actually understand what are the sticking points on my projects. Why are my projects going red? What are the common themes that are happening in them? And are there flags that I can detect in my client's tone and sentiment on the meetings before it gets escalated to me? Like my biggest pet peeve in the world was always when I'd have a client call me and I'd say, hey, how's it going? And they would say, actually, not so good. There's something that we need to talk about. And I was totally blindsided by that. So we think about compounding intelligence as a system of tools and knowledge that makes the individual frontline consultants more effective, makes your sellers able to understand the context of the environment that they're selling into, both for new customers and renewals, and then also giving management a layer to understand and flag issues and opportunities on client engagements before they become on your back foot type of problem. And that's what we're going to talk about a little bit today. So we really think that AI is just a tool. And I'm sure everybody on this conversation has experimented with ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini or any of the other different AI tools that are out there. But here's the reality. That is just another tool. And if it is not connected to the way your firm operates and your firm's methodology, it's just going to become another tool that continues to build another data silo. We firmly believe that compounding intelligence is the superpower of professional services firms. So let's talk about what sucks about professional services and how AI can help start to knit a lot of this together. This is called the What Sucks About Professional Services webinar. So for problem number one, there is a flood right now of AI tools into the marketplace, and a lot of them are really valuable. And quite frankly, they're really good. But here's the reality. You might have, note-taking software that you're using for your initial prospect and discovery call. So you have all your transcripts in tool A, and then you've got another tool that you're using for your RFP and proposal drafts. And then you've got another tool where all of your requirements live and your architecture lives. And then you've got another tool with AI that's helping you drive your sprint demos and retros and the story writing. But the reality is you're layering AI on top of these legacy problems. Like, conference calling software has been around for 30 years. Web-based document management has been around for 20 years. None of that really matters when it's all still relying in the background of someone knowing where to go in order to find the RFP that won that $1 million deal. Or, I've spent, I don't know how many hours with, dealing with an upset customer thinking that we were going to do something that's not in the contract, and going back through my email, looking for that smoking gun email that says, no, we actually agreed that this was out of scope. And so what we think needs to happen for professional services is orchestrate AI intelligence across all of that. I think professional services, more than probably any other industry, is dealing with this context switching and knowledge switching and going from problem set A to problem set B, problem set C, all in the same hour, and being able to centralize the access and control to that, but then also having that be bidirectional, where as consultants do work that's feeding back into your organizational knowledge graph, is, we believe, a total game changer. And we'll show what that looks like in a little bit once we get into the demo. Problem number 2, I'm sure everybody here has had this problem. There's the one person who knows problem. So, this could be the badass, solution architect that everybody wants their time with, and they are really, it's always impossible to find time with that person. It could be the seller that said something on some meeting at some point in the sales cycle, and now the client's under the expectation that that's going to get delivered. It could be, you're ramping up, new team members who don't understand the client context or the technology. And, you need to make it so that the client doesn't feel that transition pain that, you're trying to mask in the background. And so what we believe, how compounding intelligence can really help with this is, as you think about your methodology and your unique approach, you can actually build that institutional knowledge independent of the individual person. So, teams love this because you're able to build context against a client and a project and use that to feed into the next engagement or another customer that does something similar in the same industry. You can alleviate key person risk, where one person leaves the firm, the entire project blows up because they're the only one who knows how to do something. And it also reduces the burden on sales, because I can't tell you how many times I've been asked to join sales meetings at weird times of the day because they want me on the phone in front of a customer, and I always want to help with that. The reality is I have a life too, and a lot of the time I wasn't actually needed on that sales meeting, and I could have been doing something probably more valuable for the firm. And so imagine being able to take at least part of the brain out of your expert resources and put them at the fingertips of everybody else in the firm, so that at least a lot of the simple questions that get asked, and a lot of those frontline questions, or a lot of the frontline knowledge about what's happening with a project or client, can get answered directly by the AI without needing to actually go and talk to someone and spend everybody's time doing that. So that's problem number 2. Number 3, I can't tell you how much time I've spent writing SOWs, and 9 times out of 10, the SOW is almost the same as the prior version of the SOW, except that I have to go through and validate all of the 40 assumptions again, and I have to redo and rebuild the solution approach, and I have to go through prior calls and notes in order to make sure that everything's comprehensive. And then even then, after I wrote that SOW, I inevitably forget something that was discussed on some call but isn't being paid for, that isn't ending up in the SOW, but then in 2 months the client thinks is. So I think everybody here has felt that pain of going back and forth and needing to rebuild documents and proposals every single time. And then not only that, but you're constantly onboarding people, and usually the onboarding process from hire A to hire B is a little bit different because there are different project constraints and project demands. And a lot of times you're meeting that person in the lobby at the client on their first day, and you're expecting them to walk into a room cold and present well. And then finally, like the dreaded, client question of, didn't you do this before? Or, that's why we hired you. And so being able to get ahead of that and know where the bodies are buried is really important. And so what I'm going to show you partially here today in our demo is how every engagement is going to feed back into that compounding knowledge graph, how you can enforce your methodology, not only from a quality standpoint, but as a tool, and how you can transform your project work through the natural path of work of a consultant into lasting assets so that you don't have to do some kind of project retro at the end of the meeting or at the end of the engagement where nobody ever has time because they're off to the next project, and you end up again with this problem of not so great client stories, not so great what we've solved type stories, and the problem just repeats itself. So really, for the first time, we believe that we're in the position where we no longer need to take a lot of these, quite frankly, some of these ceremonies that are really challenging and add a lot of stress and time to people's calendar, and we can generate them as an artifact of how people just naturally work and, quite frankly, how they want to work. And then we can talk about pricing. So I think one of the key things that we're seeing across all of our client base is how consulting is trying to reinvent how we price, but we really don't have the data and the context to effectively price that deal. So I hear more and more about firms trying to switch from T&M engagement to fixed bid, for example, or throughput-based engagements. But the reality is that's a really big risk to take in the business model, because that data around, what has our historical margin been on a T&M engagement, especially when there's been multiple change orders? Or how do I get ahead of scope creep proactively so I'm not giving away work on a fixed bid contract? I can confidently say to the customer, no, this is out of scope, and we discussed it as out of scope in this conversation on this date, and this is who was in that meeting. And then, being able to prove the value that you're delivering on this individual engagement, but also on historical ones to help drive renewal conversations. So what we're going to do here is we're going to show how we preserve institutional knowledge, how we capture client stories in real time, and how we can repackage those using AI in the tone of voice and in the language that a client wants to hear it. Because that's the other reality. A lot of times a customer is going to ask for, where have you solved this before? There's some slides that are out there, but they don't really in the language. So you end up taking those slides that have been pre-built and rewriting them anyway. We can actually go and solve a lot of that problem using AI today. And then finally, commoditization. I think the thing that we're hearing especially is, well, how is consulting transformed by the rise of AI? And is this a good thing or a bad thing? And we're firmly in the camp that we think that consultants are going to be needed more than ever. But here's the dirty secret. If you're using an AI tool that does not have your language, your methodology, the way that your firm actually operates, you're going to sound like every other firm out there. So being able to take all of the knowledge that your firm has built and repackaging that in a way that, using AI, that sounds like your firm with your competitive differentiator in it, we believe is a huge part of the secret sauce of every professional services firm. Company is paying a consultant to come in and act like the expert to deliver, to cut through a lot of the chaos. And we're seeing, small firms that are taking advantage of compounding intelligence beat firms like McKinsey because they're able to more rapidly iterate on the proposals and the solutions that they're delivering and systematize the way that they're talking as a firm across from the CEO all the way down to the frontline consultants. So here's what I'm going to walk you through today. I'm going to spend a couple minutes. I want to leave time for our Q&A. I'm going to show how you can build AI agents built with a consistent voice across your organization, where you can control the tone and the knowledge and the format of those agents. I'm then going to show how you can bring those agents into the natural path of work for consultants. And by bringing those agents into the natural path of work for consultants, you're going to be able to capture company-wide context through that natural path of work. So every meeting, every SOW, every interaction turns into an asset and like an app that can be reused across the entire organization, all with enterprise level security and permissions around that, so people can only see what they should be able to see. I'll walk through our project module, where we enable the consultants with a centralized hub to manage all of the pieces I just talked about, and providing management with the ability to proactively flag risks and issues on a project, being able to understand where there are opportunities and gaps in how things are being delivered, and again, that security layer. And then finally, I'm going to wrap up the demo by showing how you can generate artifacts like SOWs at scale with probably a higher level of quality than you're doing it today, I'd be willing to bet, and in a fraction of the time. So I'm going to walk through all of that, and then we'll open it up for Q&A. So I'm going to hop over into Moonnox. So what you're looking at here is our agent studio. And this is a function that allows your firm to build AI agents that can focus on a specific task or a set of tasks. So for the purposes of showing here, I'm going to show our project agent that we're going to be looking at in a couple of minutes. So you can see what I've done here is I've prompted this agent to explain, you're a BA assistant, an AI that supports project and program management, and I've given it a core set of job functions. I say you look at SOWs, you analyze communication histories. I have given it a prompting around how I want it to specifically write user stories in the format that my firm does, and I've given it a set of these tasks. I have all of the parameters that I want in order to be able to tweak the underlying LLM models based on how I want to fill that context window based on my company's knowledge. Maybe some of that knowledge is internal, maybe some of that is external from the broader internet, but I have full ability to customize this. So this agent right now is running off of GPT 4.1. There's a bunch of other parameters here that I've set. So now, and you can build these agents in a way that might be focused on a certain technology, a certain practice area, a certain moment in time on an engagement, and bring that into the natural path of work. So I'm going to show what that looks like. I'm going to pop over to our project module, and I'm going to go into my Galactic Foods implementation project. So this is a fictitious company called Galactic Foods. And a couple of things to point out here on this project. So right up here in the upper left, you can see that we've tagged this project. So we've tagged this project as being a CPG company and a company that operates in the food and beverage industry. So what that means is now every time an artifact happens on this engagement, whether that's a meeting, whether that's something that gets ingested from a file that gets uploaded, or something that even comes in for a system like Jira, we're not just saying that this is part of the Galactic Foods engagement, but it's part of the CPG industry, and it's a food and beverage company. So all of that knowledge is rolling up at the organization level. You can see I've got I have a meeting that I've had with the customer, and I have added team members onto this engagement with a set permission level. So for example, Glenn and Robert are both able to view and access this project, but they can't administer it. So we have permissions and controls around the visibility on this project. And then I've also brought in a set of agents that all can swarm around this project. So I have a client story agent, a sales handoff agent. And I'll show, like, so for example, if I wanted to ask this client story agent, where have we worked in the food and beverage? So now what this agent's going to actually do is go out into our company knowledge graph, look for other customer stories where we've implemented in the food and beverage industry, and then deliver me a set of customers. And I could chat with this just like you would expect any AI chatbot. So I could, drive in and dive into Fresh Bite Foods, ask about the project and outcome, and build that out right there if I want to in real time, which is really powerful. The other thing that, when we're talking about path of work is now, let's say we've had a couple different meetings and it's time to hand this off to delivery. The customer is ready to sign their SOW. Well, we have a sales handoff agent. So I could come in here and I could say, generate a handoff. And the type of process that usually happens where there's some type of meeting between sales and delivery, and it usually gets pushed out 5 times because people have other things going on. You can automate and enforce at the organization level with an AI agent that's actually looking at all of the context that's driven up to that point during the sales cycle. And in 10 seconds, not only did I call out, here's the sales cycle snapshot and here's what the project is, but like we have a gap. We don't have an executive sponsor. We don't have certain things that are necessary in order for me to properly hand this project off. It's not ready. These things need to get resolved. Again, another really powerful thing. Last thing I'll show, we also have automated the process of artifact generation. So for purposes of our demo here today, let's talk about Galactic Foods and they're trying to implement a lead routing project. It's time to write the SOW. And I know at every firm, the process of writing that SOW is really challenging a lot of times. It takes a lot of work. There's usually some deal desk involved. There's usually 10 approvals that need to go through, all of these things. We can automate a lot of the grunt work that goes into that. So what you're looking at here is our boilerplate company SOW. You can see it has all of this boilerplate language. But what we've done is, as part of our template, we've brought agents into this template that explain for the scope of services how I want you to answer. And I've prompted these agents not only with examples and format from our knowledge graph, but also how exactly the format in the document should work. So now if I come back here, I can say, all right, here's our corporate template. I'm going to clone this and I'm going to link it directly to my Galactic Foods project. And that'll take a second to clone. But what's going to happen now, you'll see, is I have my cloned SOW and I can click generate now. This will take about 30 seconds while it's generating, but I'll tell you what's happening in the background. This template is now looking at all of the conversations that have happened with Galactic Foods up to that point. It's looking at the organization where we've potentially done things before. It's looking at how we price and how we sell. It could even be going out to something like a PSA and looking at who's available and on the bench through Model Context Protocol. And like that, I've gotten here in my SOW template, the background, solution review, a good set of assumptions, and even my resource plan. So that used to take me half a day, and I just got a pretty solid first draft that someone would need to review and look at, but in, what was that, 30 seconds. So just to bring it back to what we were talking about before and to wrap up, that was like the total crash course on the problem that we're trying to solve. I didn't show how we can go in and automatically update Jira when a call ends. I didn't show how we're flagging health proactively on projects, but I hope that does show that thinking of your platform like a true platform instead of using disparate tools is becoming more important than ever. And we're seeing the firms that are embracing this most strongly are able to think about how their firm grows, not linearly, where every new dollar equates to an equal amount of headcount, but how we're able to enable growth in a nonlinear manner, which we believe is really truly the first time in professional services where that can happen at scale. And so, we're building this platform where we're going to have all of the full life cycle of delivery at your fingertips, the things that consultants need every single day, all the way from client alignment, selling, and delivery, all the way through that renewal, and then feeding that back in as a full loop that your organization can take advantage of. And that's our tagline. Even superheroes need backup. We really like consultants. All right. So with that, I think we're going to open it up for Q&A.
We are. Thanks, David. And thanks everyone for joining us. I actually don't have any questions in the chat, and I know we've got some talkative people here. I welcome you to post questions in the chat, as well as go ahead and come off mute and ask us anything about the platform, what you saw today, how this relates to what's happening in your firm. We're here for you. What do you got? We have a question. David, can the agents call out to other agents?
They can, yeah. So there's a lot of different ways where that can be done. The thing that we're really excited about that we released pretty recently is this emerging technology. Some people might be familiar with it, might not, called Model Context Protocol. And basically what that allows your agents to do is to call out to other agents and also to other systems. So we actually put a demo together for a customer or a prospect yesterday where we were able to take meetings that have happened during a sales cycle, and then automatically I can prompt that agent to then go and populate a sprint board inside of Monday.com was their project management tool of choice. It's actually able to automatically go and populate that board, all just from one prompt. And we're seeing more and more use cases for that in real time across our customers. It's pretty exciting.
That's pretty sick. Okay, we've got another question. How do the Moonnox agents interact with CRM platforms like Salesforce, Dynamics, HubSpot?
Yeah, totally. So we actually have, so there's a phrase in the AI world called context engineering. And I think a lot of people are familiar with the term prompt engineering, but not everyone yet is super familiar with context engineering. And it's this concept around how do you feed the large language model just what it needs in order for it to perform the intended task without confusing it so much by giving it garbage information that impacts its ability to actually complete that task. So we have different ways based on the use case and the problem set that's trying to be solved to accomplish that. So one way that we can accomplish that is we can actually go into a system like Salesforce and ingest the raw data from the platform and make that available to the LLM. We can even go in the case of Salesforce, and ingest something like a report, where, or if you think about it, a report has more meaning behind it than raw Salesforce database rows, as an example. And so we can build context around, if we have a pipeline report or a staff availability forecast, the agent can understand the context around how that data is organized and set up to be able to respond. So that's number one. We can actually go and ingest the data, and we provide a mechanism to sync. The other way that can be done is through model context protocol, which allows us to go and have the agent in real time reach out to external applications and using their API, read in and perform real-time searches, which is great for things where you might not want to necessarily sync the data, or it might be secondary data that helps augment the problem you're trying to solve. So this might be something like going out and sending an email, or going out and reading documentation that's stored in like a system like Notion, for example.
Great, thank you. All right, folks, I want to give one last call for questions. And we got one. All right, how would this work for large teams on an enterprise account? Can the platform keep multiple work streams cross-informed to the point where an engagement manager could use a Moonnox to stay up to date?
Yes, and that's actually one of the main problems we're solving. So like a really common example we see, I'll give one. Let's say you're working with a large distributed company. Let's say it's like a hospital system or something like that. You might have work that's happening in an individual department. You might have work that's happening in an individual hospital location, and you might have work that's happening across that hospital network. And then further, you might be doing work with multiple hospital networks that all are trying to solve, similar regulatory problem or something like that. I highlighted it briefly during the demo, but that tagging mechanism that we have provides a way for us to be able to feed bidirectionally information across the organization. So you can think about a hospital network. You might have a hospital network that all of your engagements under that hospital network are tagged. You might have an individual project that's happening underneath that tag, and you might have a healthcare vertical that your organization operates in. As consultants are doing work, and you have meetings, you have calls, you have SOWs, that's all feeding not only into your individual project, but up to the broader organization. And so people can be cross-informed, and your agents can help inform as well. So like for example, one of the common use cases we're seeing around this is in renewal conversations, right? What's all of the work that's happening here, and how are we, how should we position this in order to get a renewal? Or tell me about all of the conversations that our firm is having with healthcare, and generate me some blog posts out of that, and being able to do that. We have some customers that are doing those types of things. So you can think of it like this multi-dimensional Rubik's Cube, where you can actually, based on the question you're trying to get out of it, you can ask it in a different way.
Thank you. Okay, that is our list of questions, unless we get a last minute slide in like last time. Oh, we have one more. Okay. See, this keeps working. Our advisory engagements take place in a system called PFX engagement. Can Moonnox interact with this system to track progress, maintain data, etc.?
We don't have a native connector to that, but there isn't a system yet we haven't been able to connect to. We have an open API. We have our ability for our agents to go and call APIs. So that's of interest of having a conversation on. Yeah, we could. And I'll also say, connecting into PSA and project management tool is like one of the top use cases. And we do that basically with every single customer we're working with.
Rock and roll. And one more. For a large organization, what becomes the role of a knowledge manager? The job certainly changes, but I feel like it doesn't go away.
I wholeheartedly agree. I think the knowledge manager, their job becomes honestly probably a lot less frustrating and more exciting. Like if you think about what a knowledge manager does today, probably I would say a third to half of their job is probably just trying to deal with rescheduled meetings that people are pushing off because they have something else to work on. So imagine now if you're able to come to a consultant and say, hey, look, I've gone through your project. We have an agent in the application that's able to extract, because it's really well prompted. It's able to extract the success story and the key knowledge layers out of this project. Can we validate this? Is there anything that you would tweak? And then being able to take that forward and deliver a much higher quality and much higher volume of output, and and being able to ask new questions that probably we aren't even asking now. Like I gave that example of like, mine all of the client calls that are happening and write some blog posts out of that. Like what's our company point of view actually on topic X? Like we have the marketing line, but what are people actually saying on meetings? For the first time, you can actually go and extract that at scale.
Awesome. All right. Thank you, folks, for joining us. If you have any other questions, you know where to find us. LinkedIn, moonnox.com. David, anything you want to say to wrap it up?
Thank you all for your time. We really appreciate it. We know everybody's busy. Have a good one.